I once heard trust described as it's not just the consistency of showing that you have someone else's interests at heart. It's also about showing that you have those interests at heart, even when it might run counter to your own. When we created this new version of the app, we wanted to create a really holistic, all-in-one place that homeowners could go to care for their home, regardless of whether they decide to use a Thumbtack Pro or not. Maybe it doesn't directly serve our business, but we believe like this is the right experience to create for customers. And ultimately that creates the right trust, that right long-term relationship with customers.
This is Next Gen Builders, the show for the growth and product leaders of tomorrow. Today, we're talking about building digital products that also have a physical experience. Some of us might remember calling a taxi on a wired phone or using the yellow pages to blindly find a plumber. It was exhausting. Well, it's a different world now. It started with tech companies disrupting physical products. Interestingly now, every company and product needs a digital element. People expect a frictionless and seamless experience between the two. But how do you build and balance both then? Well, someone especially suited to speak to this topic is Alexis Baird, Head of Product Experience at Thumbtack. Welcome to the podcast, Alexis.
Awesome. And thank you so much for having me, Francois.
Well, we're so glad to have you here. Maybe we can start. Explain to us, what is Thumbtack?
So Thumbtack helps homeowners care for their home and connects them with local service pros. So think like plumbers, electricians, in order to complete home projects. And the core experience in Thumbtack has really been about hiring a pro, where my teams are focused on building kind of that next generation of customer and pro experiences. So on the customer side, it's about helping customers proactively care for their home, kind of through personalized guidance and planning tools. And then for pros, it's about obviously first connecting them with customers who are looking for their expertise, and then really help them get more value from those existing homeowners by ensuring that customers can seamlessly re-engage with their favorite pros, whether it's rebooking them or referring them to friends and family.
You know, a few of our guests have had unconventional backgrounds for product roles. Mm-hmm. Tell us about yours. It's kind of unique.
I love this question. So when I first started in product management, I think this has changed over the years, but when I first started, there was sort of a classic path to product management, and it looked something like you did your undergrad degree in computer science, you did some kind of consulting, like a McKinsey or a Bain or something, and then you went and got your MBA, and then you became a product manager. And that was very much not my path. I was a liberal arts major at a small school called Bryn Mawr College outside of Philadelphia. I kind of dabbled around before finally settling on majoring in linguistics for my undergrad degree. I didn't know what I wanted to do with that, so I spent actually a year in Vietnam after that, trying my hand at teaching English, where I discovered I didn't have the gift of teaching. And so I went back to school to get a degree in computer science to try to merge that and study computational linguistics. So I kind of fell into product management. My first job out of grad school, we just didn't have a lot of product managers in the office. And I was sort of approached by that one product manager and asked if I wanted to do this. And I said, yes, not really knowing what that would entail. And then that kind of has how I ended up there. But over the years, I love kind of hearing about those origin stories, because I think there are some really interesting ways to sort of find yourself in product management.
Yeah, for sure. And you've got like that perfect combination of art and science, which need to come together to build amazing things.
I certainly think so. I think that liberal arts kind of really helps me in my job on a daily basis.
Can you say more about that? Like, how does that liberal arts education, the way of thinking, makes you see the world in a different way, maybe today?
Yeah, lots of different ways. So I think fundamentally, at least my experience with liberal arts, was that you learned how to kind of learn, if that makes sense. And whether it was evolutionary biology, whether it was like Afro-Latino literature, just kind of to approach with that learning mentality. And then from that, all those different inputs, synthesize sort of a point of view and a path forward. And that is very much product management, right? You have to take in all these different inputs, everything from, marketing insights, business needs, your user needs. What are your different users saying? What is that, sort of classic qual and quant? What is the data saying? What are kind of, some of those more qualitative insights? You have to understand the technical constraints, the design constraints, all of those together, and then be able to synthesize those into an experience that ultimately is going to be really impactful. And that kind of that core talent, I guess, or skill for a better way of putting it, I think is something that, again, at least in my experience, I really got from my liberal arts background.
We talk a lot about the idea of the beginner's mind, and you just kind of described this, the learning mindset. Here you're learning technology, you're learning product management, a skill, but you also have to learn a new domain. Like when we're going to talk about Thumbtack in the physical world, there's a lot in there that you have to go and have empathy, but also learn kind of how do you serve them better. Do you apply that in how you engage with customers or how you build good products?
Yeah, absolutely. At Thumbtack, we are helping homeowners care for their home. We are connecting them to home service professionals, or what we call pros, and we're helping those pros grow their business. And that means that we have to kind of serve both the needs of those customers and the needs of the pros. We have to bring those together in a digital experience. So whether it's the app or on the web, on both sides. And then there's a bunch of things that are going to happen in the real world between those pros and those customers. And I felt this when I worked at Lyft. I still feel it when I'm working at Thumbtack. It is both really challenging, but also really exciting to kind of have to think through those different challenges, to know that as a product experience, you aren't going to be there for the whole kind of experience for the customer and the pro. And so how do you kind of equip each party with the tools to really be successful at what they're trying to do? So for us at Thumbtack, we spend a lot of time talking to our customers and our pros. We also, on the product side, we rely a lot on what we call our frontline teams, so sales and support, who are kind of talking regularly to those users to understand what are their core needs, what are they trying to solve for, what are the pain points that they're facing, where's the experience falling short. And then I think this is an interesting piece that a lot of product managers don't necessarily gravitate towards, but we've seen a lot of value in being able to merge sort of the operational side. So equipping our support teams with like the right tools to then be able to kind of supplement the product experience to ensure that we're really serving both our customers and our pros as well as we possibly can.
So it's interesting because you've got a multitude of customer experiences. You've got the customer experience of the pro, you've got the customer experience of the consumer, of your teams in between, yet you also don't have the full customer experience because what happens in the field is maybe outside the digital product is also a core part of the experience. How do you stitch them all together, and like how do you even prioritize across all three? Is like one more important than the other? How do you make that trade-off?
Well, it really starts with what is the problem that we're trying to solve for our users. And so for our customers, our homeowners, owning a home is really overwhelming, and it's filled with a lot of uncertainty about kind of, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? How do I get this thing done? Is this a good price? What am I supposed to ask the pro? How do I ensure that they're actually going to kind of do the job that I need them to do? How do I convey what I need them to do? So there's a lot of aspects of homeownership that is really, really challenging. And so we are attempting to look at that entire journey. Where are the biggest pain points, the biggest places where we can add value to make that really seamless? And that was kind of the genesis of this big launch that we recently did last spring. It was the biggest product launch that we have done in the company's history. And we took the experience from being able to just find a pro and book a pro to all of kind of the experiences that happen before and after that around caring for your home. So personalized guidance on understanding what customers need to do or what homeowners need to do, when they need to do it, how they can get it done, tools around planning to ensure that they can kind of stay on top of those different tasks that they've decided they wanted to prioritize. Obviously, connecting to our broader booking experience to ensure that they can book those home service professionals that will help them with those tasks. And then finally, tools around re-engaging or like rebooking, referring their favorite pros that they've worked with in the past. And so that was kind of the genesis. We began with that. What are those needs? How are we uniquely going to solve them? And that's kind of how we prioritized from there.
That's great. And I remember when we were talking earlier, you were describing that fear, like of not knowing how to maintain your home, like how not knowing whether you should be an expert at the domain or not, and you know, making that first call. Can you like tell us a little bit more about that story?
Yeah. Well, this one's deeply personal for me. I became a homeowner for the first time about 3 years ago. And we hear this echoed from our homeowners as well, this idea that your home, for most people, is your largest financial asset. And yet the shirt that you are wearing has more how to care for it instructions than your home comes with. And that certainly has resonated for me as a homeowner. And the sort of the emotion that we hear from people is this like uncertainty, this, some people even describe it as feeling silly, where, you know, I feel like I should know these things, but I don't. And increasingly, we're kind of seeing with sort of the millennial generation, certainly, again, kind of a stereotype in comparison to boomers who were much more kind of willing to DIY or like more handy. Sort of these newer, more digital generations are thinking about, I mean, the rest of their lives, right? And so I had this experience recently where I thought, like, God, I really should know how to clean my garbage disposal, and I actually don't know how to do that. And you know, what do? Of course, turned to the internet. And what we found is obviously the internet has a wealth of information, but oftentimes it's one size fits all. And you get kind of random advice on the internet, right? And again, so what we set out to create was something that was tailored to your home and your needs and your goals for your home, to kind of help you understand how do you not feel so uncertain and at sea with, again, what is probably your largest financial asset and obviously the place where you spend a significant portion of your time. Did that touch on that one?
It does, but it also kind of hits me personally too, because I'm not handy and I have tried to follow some of the internet guides. Yet I personally feel like scared sometimes to say, who do I call? Who do I trust?
Yes.
And how do I know that I don't get, I don't say ripped off, but, bad advice from people I don't know. So, so how do you build that trust, right? Like as a digital property, yet you have a physical presence. How does trust build?
Yeah. I once heard trust described as it's not just the consistency of showing that you have someone else's interests at heart. It's also about showing that you have those interests at heart, even when it might run counter to your own. And I think that was like a really interesting piece. So we, for over a decade now, Thumbtack has been a home services platform. And we have, again, connected customers who are looking for home service professionals to home service professionals. When we created this new version of the app, again, our goal here was to create a platform or an app that homeowners could use to care for their home. Now, part of caring for your home is doing some tasks yourself. And so we wanted to create a really holistic, all-in-one place that homeowners could go to care for their home, regardless of whether they decide to use a Thumbtack Pro or not. And so we have functionality where customers can add tasks that they're going to do themselves. They can also track tasks that they, have a non-Thumbtack Pro for. But again, it all kind of came back to what is the homeowner's needs, How do we serve those needs, even when sometimes in the short term, maybe it doesn't directly serve our business, but we believe like this is the right experience to create for customers. And ultimately that creates the right trust, that right long-term relationship with customers.
It's awesome. Please tell me that there's not a honey-do list for my wife to put all the tasks that I'm behind of.
It's funny. We actually have discussed this a lot internally. There's a big divide between people internally who really want this feature, and people who really don't want this feature. So, yes, I stay tuned.
Well, I actually think, as bad as it feels because the list keeps growing, it's actually an interesting lead gen opportunity if you really think about it, because then you're expressing what needs to happen and how do you motivate people like me to actually get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really key to sort of how do we help the customer sort of first generate that list, obviously, but then we want to ensure that we can help them get it done. And I think that's a key piece of it as well. So not just create a way for your significant other to sort of nag you about the things you're behind on.
I think it'll happen regardless. And that's a great thing.
Touche.
So we talked a lot about the consumer side, that end user experience, but you've got an interesting aspect with your marketplace where the professional, I mean, you talk about the pro, and sometimes you think of the pro in terms of sophistication, but here are the professionals at their craft, not necessarily at technology. I guess, how do you design it in a way that they want to use the technology and they're able to spend more time doing what they're skilled for, right? Which is solving whatever problem there is, than having to deal with all of this technology overhead?
Absolutely. I love that question. So when you talk to our pros, or I'm sure even if you were to kind of ask a home service professional in your life, for most of them, they did not get into the line of business that they're in so that they could do sales pitches and try to track down new customers, or try to, chase people down for their availability and schedule the next task. They got into it because they enjoy and are good at the craft, and that's what they want to focus on, whether it's plumbing, whether it's painting, whether it's, floor work, whatever it is. And so we, again, I think, view our job as how do we ensure that we can take some of that work off their plate, to help them continue to grow their business, ideally even grow their business more effectively, of course, than they would be able to. And so that they can go back to focusing on that craft. And so I think there's several pieces to that. The first, when you talk to pros, getting a customer who perhaps is not like fully educated about what they want to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it. And so again, that was some of the pieces of the customer launch that we did earlier, was about really educating customers, giving them that guidance so that pros didn't have to do that. Pros didn't have to spend their time saying, well, you don't need to do this, or you do need to do this, or this is how much it's roughly going to cost, et cetera. So we really want to get customers into a place where then when we hand them off to pros, it's a high quality customer for the pros. The other piece that we've seen is that around kind of scheduling and some of these like vetting the customer to make sure that the customer is actually looking for something that the pro can do. And so that's where Thumbtack's matching experience comes into play. And this is an area that we've invested a lot into, and will continue to invest in the future. But the dream here is not that it's like 1992 where you're going back and forth on the phone and the pro kind of finally gets to the point where they're like, I don't even do jobs like that. That's a really frustrating experience. This is more, we want to create that, 2024 experience where it's really seamless for both customers and pros so they can go back to enjoying the things that they love.
That's awesome. Can we go back to some 1992 music though? Because some really good bands back then.
I'm with you. Yeah. That part is good.
Your story resonates a lot because I think of myself as a builder. And when I think about building, I'm thinking of two things. One is, how do I remove problems that customers have so they can do their jobs better, whatever their job is? The ultimate goal is not use technology is spend more time doing the thing you're supposed to do, and the technology
Yeah,
should
I love that.
facilitate that. And that
I love
applies
that. Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
At the same
Yeah.
time, there's also the building for like higher impact. Like how can you be more successful at your job by giving
Yeah.
you better
Yeah.
tools, et cetera. Kind of feels
Yeah.
like you guys are tackling both of them. It's remove the stuff
Yeah.
they don't like to do because it's not core, yet at
Exactly.
the same time, enable them to be more effective at spending the time on the right stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see that on both the sort of customer homeowner side and the pro side as well. So our homeowners talk a lot about, I want to go back to living the rest of my life. I don't want to be kind of constantly worrying about like, I got to take care of this, I got to take care of that. And so removing some of that friction for them. Well, at the same time, we don't want them just kind of status quo, like continuing to do what they were doing before, maybe with like a little less time. We want them to walk away feeling much more confident that they're on top of caring for their home. And I say it feels good to feel like you're being proactive, especially on something that, again, it's your largest financial asset that you're spending all this time in, that your family spends all this time in. And so, yeah, absolutely, that resonates for the customer experience we've created. And then as I mentioned on the pro side as well, we want to make it easier for them to grow their business, and we want them to be able to grow their business significantly more than obviously if they had tried to do that on their own.
Right. Along those lines, how do you think of success? Like, what does success look like in your environment?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a bunch of ways to kind of answer that. One is just kind of, what are we trying to accomplish for our users, right? And in the case of homeowners, we're trying to ensure that they can care for their home with confidence. On the pro side, we want them to be able to seamlessly grow their business. And so I think starting from that place, if we do that well, what is sort of almost the metric or sort of expression of that? And so we talk about, ultimately, that is about being able to get jobs done seamlessly, right? For both the customer and pro side. And I think we're very lucky in that, in general, as a marketplace, if we sort of serve the customer well, we're also serving the pro well. So I say, if we help customers care for their home with more confidence, in general, obviously there's always some edge cases, but in general, that means more jobs for our pros. It means more sort of educated and informed customers for our pros, which we know is something our pros really want. And then from the sort of Thumbtack or business perspective, our business like incentives are very aligned with that as well, which I think is really, really important to ensure that you have all three of those things are in good alignment.
In this kind of business where it's a marketplace, right? How do you know you're heading in the right direction? And it kind of made me think of, you were at Lyft, you're at Thumbtack. There's a flywheel that happens where the more demand will create more supply, then more supply will create it is the flywheel.
Yes.
Is there a formula or an approach that you've seen that flywheel actually accelerates itself?
I would say I think a lot about almost that, coming back to that incentive piece and asking yourself, if I have been really successful, and it's funny you mentioned like success. My immediate thought was this sort of intangible, like we create peace of mind for both our customers and our pros. But what does that look like? And then ask yourself, if that feels very aligned and those incentives are very aligned between the two sides of your marketplace, then you've hit on what can be a flywheel, right? So if you're creating value on both sides and that's feeding each other, then that's where you get that, that beautiful flywheel. But without that, yes, it's much, much harder to kind of build these sustainable marketplaces.
Yeah. Sometimes I find people talk a lot about OKRs or, success metrics and agonize to align everybody there. What I find kind of interesting here is, in a way, in this case, as a consumer, I might use a service and I actually don't want to call it back because my job is done. And so how do you actually get people to want to do more jobs, right, and expand the possibilities? So I don't know how much repeat business is important versus its reviews, size of business.
Yeah. Well, in our case, I think we're really lucky because we're not a single marketplace. So we're not a marketplace where you can find plumbers and that's it. We are a marketplace where you can find all kinds of home service professionals. And so our strategy is really built on create a really valuable first time experience. So in that moment when a homeowner says, "Oh my God, my sink is broken. I don't know any plumbers. I need to find a plumber." They come to Thumbtack. They have an amazing hire experience with like a really great plumber. Then they think, great, that was actually really, really helpful. And they sort of open the Thumbtack app and it's like, how do I feel like I'm more on top of kind of caring for my home so that I don't find myself in this place where my sink is broken and, I'm scrambling to find a plumber. And then they sort of step through that experience so that then when that, the time comes for them to say like, actually, oh, I just learned I really need to clean my gutters so that, I don't get mold in my roof. Well, guess what? We have like gutter cleaning pros. So I think that's where Thumbtack is in some ways unique compared to, I know I've never worked at a dating platform, but I've heard this is sort of like the chronic issue, right? With like dating marketplaces. If you sort of do your job well, your users disappear. Whereas Thumbtack has the luxury of we have all of these different home service categories. And again, so if we do really well kind of on that first initial project, then we're looking to kind of create a longer term relationship with the customer.
Yeah. Moral of the story is a home is a lot of work. And how do you get peace of mind so you don't have to worry about the amount of work that needs to happen?
Yes, exactly. So you can go back to enjoying your home. Yeah, not worrying about it.
Spend more time doing life than worrying.
Yes, exactly. It's a great life motto.
Talking about mottos and building, one of the things I find always interesting to hear about when you talk to builders is, talking about their oh shit moment. That moment when you're building something and something unexpected happens. Could be good, could be bad. Do you have one of those like standout oh shit moments?
So many. Yes. When you said oh shit moments, my first thought was, and this has happened to me throughout my career at every company I've been at, but that moment when you've launched something new or you have a new experiment and you get back the results and the results are amazing and they're some would say too good to be true. And I would say 9 times out of 10 in my experience, they are too good to be true. And there's a data quality issue. So I think that data quality issue moment is definitely an oh shit moment. I would say what I sort of over the years have taken from that is obviously the when they're too good to be true, they're often too good to be true. But I think it's really easy to get wrapped up in the story when you see those positive numbers because you believe in the strategy, right? And I think being able to kind of pair what you're seeing in the numbers with that broader intuition is really, really important to being able to balance those two things. I also think it requires a certain degree of cognitive dissonance. So on one hand, as a product leader, you believe in the strategy. And I think it's important to kind of have that confidence as kind of a leader on the team or broader teams. But at the same time, you need to always be open to those new signals coming in to sort of ask yourself, do I need to reevaluate this? And so, that one has bitten me many times.
So part of what I hear in that is that you kind of have to question everything. Don't just assume that everything is there. Like really dive deep into the details and get to the truth. And even if the truth isn't quite right, try to understand what went wrong and what you would do differently. I guess, if you're in a situation like this one, and sometimes people are confronted with one of these oh shit moments and they just don't know what to do. They feel sometimes it can be paralyzing when a crisis emerges or, crisis can be, again, positive or negative, but it happens and people are like, oh my God, I am stuck. What do you do? How do you help people kind of overcome that, the fear of that failure or
Yeah.
the fear of the over success, and give them a path towards resolution.
Yeah. It's funny, as I was thinking through this, I was also thinking about I've learned, I think, a lot from some of the leaders that I've worked with in the past. And of our current CEO, Marco, is actually really, really excels at this. And I would kind of encapsulate that as be forward looking. You can't kind of dwell on the past too much. And so instead, and I've seen him do this multiple times, it's something I really respect, because I think it's very easy in a crisis moment to kind of react with strong emotions, right? You get angry, you get really upset. I think we can all think of horror stories of like, execs throwing chairs or like freaking out. But I think it's really important to kind of step back, just acknowledge like, okay, we're here. What did we learn from this that we can apply going forward? And Thumbtack actually has a culture around the shorthand we use is CBBs, could be betters, but it's really about reflecting on maybe things that didn't go that well, but pulling out what are the learnings from them? What can we take from this to actually make things better in the future? And it's a practice that I've tried to implement with my teams. It's something I've tried to do for myself. And I think it does help. I mean, again, the sting of the oh shit data quality moment isn't going to completely go away. But if ultimately you can take that and kind of apply the learnings going forward, I think it's ultimately, more of a positive than might seem in the initial.
Yeah, I like that you guys have a very strong, learning mindset and continuously be learning and growing and developing people. You mentioned to me that a program that you guys are running in terms of coaching individuals and helping them think in a different way. Tell us about like how you're approaching that people leadership side.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough, Thumbtack has a program where you can work with an external coach. Worked with a really wonderful, very talented external coach named John Childers. And he really helped me kind of see things in I think, a different light for my own kind of leadership style. And it sounds a little cliche because people talk a lot about the platinum rule, but I think it's something I've had to kind of learn and relearn over and over again. And he kind of helped me see an interesting pattern where, for me personally, I gravitate towards a certain style of recognition or lack thereof. When I kind of reflect back on, professors, coaches, piano teachers that I really resonated with, they were always sort of a certain personality type that maybe I would describe as, or you could describe as sort of that old world. They didn't give compliments easily, and were very kind of forward in what they wanted to see, in terms of their feedback. At the same time, he also helped me see I'm very extroverted, like kind of a people person. And so I was applying kind of the style that worked for me to my team, my peers. And he pointed out that can be really hard for people. And so he prompted me to kind of reflect on what are the different ways in which people want to be coached or recognized. So some people want public recognition. Some people sort of receive that or want like more of my time is a way of recognizing their performance. And it's something that, ironically, I've also applied this to my parenting, that it can be really powerful to reinforce for someone when they're doing something well, in addition to perhaps when they're doing something not so great that you need them to do differently. But in many ways, that sort of positive reinforcement can be really, really powerful. And so it's something that I've tried to be really conscious of going forward in kind of my leadership style and the way I, interact with my coworkers and my children.
I mean, I actually totally agree with that. I remember when I started managing people, I thought I should manage everybody the way that I like to be managed. And I had one style for everybody.
Yep.
And like my big aha moment was going through situational leadership and realizing that different people needed different things depending on what kind of person they were, where they were, whether they needed more support, call it micromanagement, going to the details, to the superstars that need a different level of recognition, project ambition. And, you know, you always have to balance that out when you're managing individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That some people want to see that pay raise. Some people want to see that promotion. Some people want more responsibility. Like, yeah, that can be very different depending on the person.
Yeah. And you have to be able to adapt to the right situation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I was thinking about the discussion, and, you know, we talked a lot about what you do and what you build for other people, but I don't think that we heard about what your last home project was that you did, and how did that go?
So my most recent project was one that I'm actually mildly embarrassed that I put it off for as long as I did. But we have a bathroom fan that has been needing to be replaced for probably since we moved in 3 years ago. And again, speaking of the sort of silly homeowner feeling, not knowing what you don't know, I had this vague sort of like, I guess, bathrooms have fan. That's kind of important. And of course, this poor fan really, really needed to be replaced. Because if you don't have like a good working fan in your bathroom, you know, mold and things like that collect much more quickly. So I did finally knock that out a few weeks ago, and happy to report that we have a much better fan in our bathroom. But yeah, again, it was that kind of those tasks where my husband and I would go back and forth on like, I think we could probably do it ourselves. But at the end of the day, getting a professional to come in and knock it out, you know, huge weight off my shoulders.
It's funny. I had the exact same problem. I called it the stinky towel problem, because no matter how much we cleaned it, it was like it just never smelled right. Turns out it was the fan. It wasn't actually clearing out the humidity.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that, again, like you think you would have gotten to this point in life and would have known already, but you know, I think there's so many of those moments with homeowners that, you're like, I probably should have known that, but no one tells you.
Well, I think that's a perfect way of capping it off, because there's always more to learn. There's more to learn about our homes, what you need to do and what you have yet to do. There's more to learn about building. There's more to learn about people. And there's more to learn just in general.
Yeah, love it.
And I think you've encapsulated that perfectly.
Great.
Well, Alexis, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for listening to Next Gen Builders. Look out for our next episode wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe.